Hello, this is Kit, and this is a video showing how I used a circle skirt to help my daughter to visualize some math concepts. Now, the first thing that you need to do is visualize what a circle skirt is. It is a big circle. So if you were to lay it flat, the entire skirt would lay like a big donut. So you can see this is a little image of someone wearing a circle skirt, and there are two important measurements to obtain. One is the circumference of the waist, and one is the length of the skirt. You'll need both of those measures. So this is where, your child could get those measures themselves, or they could have your help. My daughter was indicating how long she wanted her skirt to be. So I got that measurement, helped her, and we got around her waist. Now, this video is following a circle skirt video that I made probably a year ago. So you can watch that for a refresher. But, circumference is 2 pi r. So we know now her circumference of her waist was 27 inches, and the length of the skirt that she was interested in was 24 inches. So at this point, I asked her to do some math, which is kind of interesting to watch. So she has to re-articulate the equation, and then she can insert 27 for C eventually. Now, I have an older daughter. This process took painfully long amount of time, considering how old she is. So she needed to find the radius. The radius is important because that's what you are going to use to draw out your cut on the fabric when it's folded into quarters. I did help her with a calculator at this point since she framed the problem correctly. She knew what math she was doing. So I did teach her about the about symbol at this point, that the radius is about 4 inches and 1/4. And then with this, you also need to subtract an inch because you're going to be creating a seam between the skirt and the belt that's going to chew up some of your fabric. So that leaves you with 3 1/4 inches as the radius that we need to obtain. So we sped this footage up a lot because this took a bit of time for my daughter to do. She used a piece of string, marked it with the lengths that she needed to get, and it actually was a major fail. So she went about marking her circumference using the radius a couple of different ways to make sure that she got that radius correct. So she's drawing it in really dark. And then we realized that the skirt couldn't do 24 inches in length. It went into the selvage at that point. So we just went and found the length that it could go to with that selvage. And then she marked a dotted line and colored it in. Now you can see there's a lot of fabric left over, and as anyone who watched my other video knows, you have to now create a band, a waistband. So this is an area that I stepped in with her on. So the waistband is obviously going to need to be the length of your circumference. So we know the circumference is 27 inches. Working off of the folded end of the fabric, half of 27 inches is I should be able to do this in my head. 14.5 inches. Oh, yep. I forgot that my camera fell. So we helped to mark out that, and then 4 or 5 inches in width, because that is going to be folded in half. And then I also had her try out the radial cutter for this section since she was dealing with a flat edge. it was probably the safest part to cut out, and then I cut out the curved edge for her. This is also some good practical learning as well. And then the straight to completely cut out that band that she was going to need to have, that waistband. Now this was a very stretchy knit, so it really was having a hard time with the radial cutter. I even had some problems with it imposing the normal amount of pressure, as you'll see here in a moment. So I didn't want her to try cutting just by eye, so I did that part for her. You can see we have that quarter, which will fold out to a full circle. So you can start to visualize that skirt at this point. Now, I started to talk to her about the different options of the hem and the seam that we were going to be working on. So I went to grab a couple of skirts that I have so that I could show her some of the options. So I talked to her about just a general hem at the bottom, like a straight hem, which is what she ended up doing. I was showing her a blind hem that I've done on a skirt. And then I was also showing her about French seams, which I enjoy, but she thought would be too much work, which it probably would have been. So after giving her her options, she chose just a simple seam, simple hem. So this is, she sewed up the edges of the waistband so that it would have a neat edge prior to it being attached to the circle skirt. So this was kind of her first sitting down with this project at a machine. Everyone knows it's 1:30 wherever I am. So at this point, she had to attach that waistband to the skirt. So she's attaching the right sides together because she's not doing a French hem. She's doing a normal, or rather a French seam. She's just doing a regular seam. This took her about 20 minutes to do all together. So you can see how much I'm moving that footage forward, just so it's a little less painful. And this is, again, practical application of math. The waistband is the length of the circumference, and so it should match up pretty tight where it meets the two ends. And you can see it completed that circle. So it's a verification that the circumference is, in fact, the amount that we measured around her waist in the beginning. And at this point, she stitched the waistband to the skirt very carefully. Just slowly stitching, removing pins as she went. She did quite good considering that she's sewing through 3 layers of fabric. And it's a lot of fabric to have to deal with on that circle skirt and keep spinning it around as you're sewing that tiny little circumference at the top of the skirt, you're having to deal with quite a lot of circumference toward the end of the skirt. So you can see she sewed it together, and the next step would be to string elastic through the waist. Now, I lost a bunch of footage here. So she took 1 inch wide elastic through that belt, through that waist, and she used a safety pin to string it through. Then she sewed a simple hem at the bottom, and then we connected the elastic, and she was done. Now, before she sewed the bottom, I did make her calculate how many feet she was dealing with sewing, and it was an astonishing over 12 feet that she had to sew at the bottom of that circle skirt. So this was a great project to do some applications of math concepts in a fun way, and it gave her some really something to be proud of at the end. Cheers.